Last month, the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency issued an alert warning to Nigerians of increased flooding this September, and that warning was not the first of its kind.
The agency said that the country was going to experience more flooding due to high rainfall intensity of long duration in the country. But despite the warning, states failed to put measures in place to mitigate against impending disaster. Now that flood has started to wreak havoc on communities. States that earlier failed to act and are in a race against time, carrying out panicky measures to prevent further destruction.
A move that, if undertaken earlier, would have shielded residents of affected communities from having to deal with the destructive outcome of the floods. All right, joining us right now is Akimbode Oluwafemi, environmental activist and tobacco control advocate. He's also the Deputy Director, Environmental Rights Action, Friends of the Earth, Nigeria. Akimbode, it's good to have you join us right now. I remember we've had you on this show before, not the first time, not the second time, talking about these issues, about the alert from the agencies about flood. What do you think is the main challenge why steps are not taken until havoc is being wreaked on homes and on people's businesses?
Good morning. I think it's quite unfortunate that, as you rightly said, we've been speaking about this. Your organization has been, warning Nigerians about the problems ahead. But unfortunately, the figures for the body bags are rising. 53 in, I think, Katsina. 3 kids were swept away in Benue. 1 here, 10 over there. People being displaced. 100,000 in Benue. Complete farmlands ruined in Sokoto, in Katsina, the President states. And I think it's quite unfortunate that we all saw this coming and nothing or little was done to avoid the problems. It's unfortunate that this is a cycle we have to repeat years in, year out. And despite the great flood of 2012, of the floods in Nigeria is being categorized as natural disaster when we have enough warning, I think we should put the blame rightly at the doorstep of the Nigerian government. And when I'm talking about the Nigerian government, I'm talking about both federal, state, and local governments who have refused to act, who have refused to take action despite the warnings that we have. And I think the problem is not over yet. When you look at the map of Nigeria, you find out that the states that we're talking about are in the northern states. And this water certainly is going to come down south. It's going to come to Kogi State, it's going to come to Anambra, it's still going way down to Delta and Bayelsa State. And nothing, absolutely nothing is being said about, getting people off the floodplains or how people should prepare, how people should react. It's so sad.
But where does the bulk of this, where does the responsibility lies? With the federal government that has issued the warnings over time, or with the state government, or even the people in the communities?
You see, it doesn't really stop about issuing warning. There should be protocols about how to evacuate people. There should be emergency services. There should be, what the local government should do for people, what the state government should do. I mean, it's get to a point that in countries where we have this kind of problem, there is what is called forced evacuation. You are initially given a warning to leave, and then after that, if you don't leave, government makes it mandatory for you to leave. There should also be, contingency plans for how to rehabilitate people that, we just seen a country passing through very terrible hurricane. Can you just imagine if that will happen in Nigeria? We'll have all been swept away because government will just issue a warning and say hurricane is coming, and then we'll leave all of us to do whatever we like. I don't think that's how government behave responsibly around the world.
All right, Akibode, in the face of the standard of living in Nigeria, the land ownership structure, a bond and ancestral ownership of land, cultures, and all of those. How do these complicate the issue of people moving away from a certain place that they have had bonds with over time?
You see, I just said earlier that this is not new. Flood don't happen only in Nigeria. So when you move away from your ancestral land because flood is coming, that does not mean you are going to lose that ancestral land. That's where we'll say government should lead this process, and then lead these people away from danger and bring them back safely to their ancestral lands. Nobody is saying government is taking, you should take away the ancestral land because there is going to be flood. No. But we're saying that we can study the pattern. They are almost near accurate this time to say, look, we're going to have high rainfall in September. And it's been happening. It's been happening in Abuja. It's been happening in other parts of Nigeria. Now we know that the flood water is going to move down south. So you move the people away from the danger, and once the water is gone, they can come back and continue their economic activities.
Yeah. Akimbode Oluwafemi, environmental rights activist, thank you so much for your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much.
To the papers now, see what the headlines are across Nigeria this morning. And I have with me journalists Charles Ideho as well as Cyril Abaku with me in the studio. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Morning,
yeah. Great. Let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper this morning. Blueprint is where we start from on insecurity. Southwest, South-South governors strategize against herders and others. Security situation stabilized nationwide. IGP is revealing this. Okay, security situation stabilized nationwide. Okay, we'll wait to see reactions to that, whether it is true or not. Now, let's go to Daily Times now. Daily Times is where we go next, and it talks about the $9.6 billion judgment debt. Presidency holds emergency meeting as CSO storm British, Irish embassies demand reversal of judgment. Whereabouts of Grace Tiger, the central negotiator of PNID contract, unknown. Okay, still controversy there surrounding this issue. News Direct is where we go next. News Direct says, it's talking about presidential polls. Supreme Court strikes out suit challenging Buhari's qualification. All right. We've seen the last of this now. We've seen the last of it now. Daily Trust is where we go next, and it talks about the $9.6 billion judgment. EFCC launches forensic probe as presidency denies meeting with the PNID. Okay, this issue is still, I guess we'll talk about this in our analysis shortly. Then the Nation newspaper is the next paper we go now. $9.6 billion judgment. Federal government draws battle line with PNID. Negotiation option shelved. Oshibajo, ministers, foreign lawyers meet on this issue. Okay, that's still on with this issue on the judgment. Now, Vanguard is the last paper now, and really has very interesting not because it's it's a cheering news, but it's a topic of concern. Federal government weighs options as another $2.3 billion fine looms. And this time around, the $2.3 billion fine over Mambila looms in France, and CSOs protest in Abuja. And Oshibajo, Malami, Emefiele, others meet in Aso Rock and file corruption charges against PNID boss, says Aundaka, the former Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. Abaku writes, Buhari seeks a national arbitration policy. Okay. This certainly Nigerians, this is going to raise eyebrows when Nigerians get to know the details of all of this. Gentlemen, if we look at several of the papers this morning, from The Nation to Daily Trust to Daily Times, they all still dwelling on this $9.6 billion fine, that is, or debt as the case may be. Now, Cyril, let me start with you on this. We see a lot of movement now in the from the presidency to the ministries, to the federal government and all of that. There's activity now as to how to handle this issue. One would say that this should have been done long ago.
Well, if you look at the scenario very closely, in my opinion, the one thing the government, the one thing that has happened in the past 1 week, so to speak, is that we have succeeded in shrouding this whole matter in a cloak of controversy.
How is that?
It is not very clear if in one breath the government talks about going to appealing the judgment and going to the US and so on. In another breath, we hear reports that government saying that they want to negotiate. And so I personally don't know where the government really stands. Yesterday, there was a meeting very clearly. Perhaps the statement the presidency put out was that there was no meeting between the vice president's office and PNID. but there was indeed a meeting among very top government officials to weigh their options. And what they also said when we inquired was that they will brief at the appropriate time. But for now, all they talk about EFCC or NIA or DSS or police probing into the thing, for me, is all dead on arrival. The first question you want to ask yourself was, when, from Yaradua to Jonathan to Buhari, was there no handover of these cases? Didn't anybody know that there was a matter of this kind looming somewhere until this whole thing blew into the open? So I think that there was negligence somewhere, quite frankly speaking. And so the first thing we do is that by now we should have decided what we wanted to do. Are we going to take it head on with P and ID, or are we indeed going to negotiate? And if we're going to negotiate, by now we should have put the wheel ahead of time, you know, to say X, Y, and Z are going to be our negotiators. Right. Let's reach out to them. But attempting to change the narrative in the public space alone will not solve the problem for us at all.
All right, Charles, a lot of government officials have called this case a fraud. They say it's a fraud and that there was no original commitment and that PNID does not have the right to, you know, the kind of entitlement they say that they are entitled to, and all of that. All of those things are out there, and we hear these things from government officials who, just like Cyril said, were saying one thing and saying another thing and then saying another thing and then saying another thing. Now, in all of this, we also hear that there's another a fine looming, against, a judgment looming against Nigeria and France. Yes. Talk to us. How do you feel about all of these?
I think it's quite sad that we have to be on this road almost every time where the halibutting is there. We find the 16 billion naira.
You had to go there.
No, because they are related. Because when the question about this P&ID, I like to ask, was there a contract? The answer is yes. Were there documents? The answer is yes. Were there agreements? The answer is yes. Did somebody renege? The answer is yes. Now the question is, who could have reneged on part or some of the part or a whole of the agreement? See, when we say, okay, we are going to be going forth and back, we need to always go back, do proper check to know exactly where we erred. So when we're able to pick it up from there, we're going to go, okay, yeah, indeed, are we culpable? So that if we don't go back to how the contract started, what were the agreement? What were the terms? What exactly did we stand to lose if we did not do?
But is it clear? Does it look clear that there were no proper records, documentation, and all of that? Because the point there is,
okay, whether proper or not proper, but was there a contract?
Yes, the point there is, at this time, Cyril, at this time, the point there is, we expect, because on the papers you hear the names of a few persons, and then eventually you get another paper, and then you hear names of other people, as the case may be.
But the people are Nigerians,
all of this, one expects that if there's a record,
apart from Yaradua, the other things are still alive.
Okay. The Minister of Petroleum at that time, Rwan Lukman,
is also okay. Maybe two of them are dead.
I am not one for political brinksmanship, and so even in a matter like this, I will still want to uphold and respect Nigeria's national interest. Otherwise, like Achebe used to say, we need to know where the rain began to beat us. Tracing this matter back to its genesis will open up a Pandora's box. A very dirty can of worms.
But do
and
we
so
need,
what we need to do?
But in true terms, Cyril, do we need forensics?
Yes,
to really go into
a
file?
Arbitration.
Yeah.
At an arbitration, was it only P and ID that was represented there? Or did we also have people pleading our case? Because, I mean, like Abiola used to say, they can't shave your head in your absence. And so what are we doing? Did we not even know that a case like this was pending before the courts? So the question is this. Don't we have the records? Charles, Mike, we do have them. The arbitration didn't just go to court one day.
It was just one day.
And suddenly the judgment was given. There was a build-up. What was the government doing all along?
Okay, let me quickly add this.
That's the big question.
Even when the government was given, let me specifically state a date. On the 16th, and that's on 15th of May 2017, there was somebody, Chief Bayo Ayorinde, who represented Nigeria in the negotiations. Okay, we're going to negotiate, negotiate the thing. It was formerly $8.4 billion, and the thing was now negotiated down to $600 million, for which Nigeria said we're going to commit in cash $100 million, and then for the company to now sign an agreement for a stay of enforcement.
All right.
So all these things are there. Why
we look forward to the pun days. We have qualified people who should look at this, and I am very confident that Nigerian government will do the needful. It's just for us to learn from the process. And
second headlines in Nigerian newspapers, and I have with me in the studio a journalist, Charles Ideho, and another journalist, a senior researcher in TVC News, Cyril Abaku. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this time. So let's take a look at the major stories we have making the headlines in today's newspapers. We'll start with the blueprint, and the blueprint is leading with an insecurity story. It says, insecurity, Southwest, Southeast governors strategized against herders' orders. Now, security situation stabilized nationwide, says the IGP. Of course, that's what the IGP is saying, that security situation is stabilized nationwide. Moving on to the Daily Times. The Daily Times is leading with $9.6 billion judgment debt. Presidency holds emergency meeting. Riders says as CSO storm British Irish embassies demand a reversal of judgment. Another rider says whereabouts of Grace Tiger, central negotiator of PNID contract unknown. We seem to have this story making the headlines again this morning on Tuesday. Let's move on to the next newspaper, News Direct. News Direct is saying that Presidency poll, Supreme Court strikes out suit challenging Buhari's qualification. That you will find on page 4 on the Nigerian News Direct. Now to the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust is leading with $9.6 billion judgment. EFCC launches forensic probe as Presidency denies meeting with PNID. Interesting story there on the Daily Trust. On the Nation newspaper, we also have the same headline saying that $9.6 billion judgment, federal government draws battle line with PNID. Negotiation options shelved, and Osinbajo ministers, foreign lawyers meet over the case. That's leading the story, the newspaper, the headline on the Nation newspaper. Now, the last one for this morning is the Vanguard, and the Vanguard is looking at FG weighs options as another $2.3 billion fine looms. Interesting. As riders, it has a $2.3 billion fine over Mambila looms in France. CSO's protests in Abuja. Another rider says Osinbajo, Malami, Emefiele, others meet in Aso-Rock. File corruption charges against PNID boss, says the ex-AGF. Abaku writes Buhari seeks national arbitration policy. Gentlemen, it seems Nigeria, looking at the fines that we seem to be owing in different countries now. We're seeing the case of France come up. You know, last week it was UK judgment all over the headlines. Now we're seeing another fine looming. Charles Ideho, can you tell us, what do you make of all this international fines that we get to see in Nigeria?
Well, before let me quickly make a correction that I mentioned earlier. Chief Bayo Ojo supposed to be, and he was the Attorney General and Minister of Justice under Obasanjo, not Chief Bayo Ayorinde. It was a mistake, so I just correct. So, correct. But let's look. Looking at this case, you must find a way to actually apportion blames where blames. I mean, where you find them, and that's to tell you that there are government officials who are, because of parochial interest, because of pecuniary interest, they find a way of building into this contrast interest that's against the spirit of development in Nigeria. That's why when we enter into any contract agreement, the interest of the country is usually not taken into consideration. It's the interest of the individuals who are party to the agreement. I tell you what happened in this case of this Mambila power plant, which started in 2003. Okay, there's a certain country, a certain company called Sunrise Power Sunrise Power and Transmission Company Limited. Okay, so they enter into an agreement with the government on a contract called BOT. BOT is an acronym for Build, Operate, and Transfer. Okay, which was supposed to be done in phases. 2003 started. Along the line, when this government came in, from the office of the Chief of Staff, we learned that rather than either review or continue with that contract, the office of the Chief of Staff now decided in their own wisdom to now re-award that contract to a Chinese consortium. So this company that have spent money, according to them, in excess of $6 million, they have not been taking contract, and nobody is telling anything. So it's this contract that existed from 2003. You are not even saying, okay, review, or the company itself doesn't have the manpower or the financial wherewithal. So that's exactly where we're looking. That's how they are going to court now to say, okay, they want to also seek redress.
Now, looking at the case, we have a $9.6 billion one in the UK still pending, and the presidency they had a meeting yesterday talking about the way forward. We had thought that negotiations were going to come up, between Nigeria, the company, and PNID, but it seems stories, we're not even sure where we are as a country, and now we're seeing another case, the 2.3 billion naira fine in
that
France.
fine is looming. It's
looming in France. Yes. What do you make of our international policy and how we tend to take issues? Where are we getting? Where's the missing link here?
Well, I think I'll start by saying that the last rider on the front page of the Vanguard is quite instructive, where Abaku by SAN has called for a national arbitration policy. You see, issues of this kind, the first thing we need to do, like I said in the first segment, I said, look, I am minded enough to put my personal opinions aside and say that in the national interest, let's have a policy, a guiding policy, for instance, that can help. Because navigating these waters, you may not be too sure. Tomorrow now, another looming fine may come up again. And these are contractual agreements that have been reached by previous governments, where perhaps because many times people who are involved in these things have their corridors for personal gain.
Yes.
And so when the new government comes in, they want to block these corridors and maybe, I don't know, maybe take them for themselves. So instead of what should be for Nigeria to be for Nigeria, we now begin to go down circles. And in the end, it comes down to a matter of a conflict of people's personal interests. Nigeria is bigger than any single individual. And so the government should sit back and do an honest assessment of its own processes and procedures and put its act together. Whether they want to go by arbitration or they want to go by litigation, whatever it is they want to do, for now, it's not even what I want to talk about. Let them sit together and know what they want to do and make sure that, look, at every stage of these whole processes, the national interest is overriding. Enough of situations where they say one thing today, they say another thing tomorrow. A confused population does not, cannot make informed decisions on what is going on. Okay? And so we need a government that knows its own internal processes and takes a policy that it feels is best and then sees to it. We will all buy into it.
Okay, but
wrong with it.
Yesterday, the presidency, the Attorney General, and some top government officials met, and of which we do not know. They said they were going to brief us on a later date. How does that play out when the country or the citizenry seems to be in the dark, not knowing what the government, is discussing at the top level on a case that involves the whole country?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's also look at it that I think it's coming too late. But the government what the government is trying to do is damage control. Okay, damage control, you are expected to, first of all, look at where you went wrong, and then you also attempt to find a way for you to repair the damage. That is that rather than tell us what they are going to do, they want to weigh all the options available to them. If you are going to go on renegotiation, they can't just hurriedly tell us. But even as I said, we have forfeited a lot of goodwill in this issue. So what government is trying to do is trying to repair damages done already. That's what you saw. The president had to tell Sibajo, know who he is in terms of, because he's very qualified for things like so, and it's also not given to frivolities. So that's why he had to call them in. They have made, rather than hastily tell the media what the details of that meeting was. They want to study it and then look at several ways and options before they can release those things. But so that's what I'm just trying to speak with them anyway.
As at the time the court judgment came out, we saw the Attorney General of the Federation addressing media saying that they were going to probe and get to the details. They were going to probe. So one would have expected that immediately, we start to see names, although we saw a long list of names of persons involved in the contract. But how does that help solve the situation?
Well, the Attorney General is saying that they're going to probe and so on. I find it a bit questionable for at least two basic reasons. in the first instance, wasn't there a handover, as I have asked this question time and again? Didn't they know what was really going on? That judgment didn't just come out of the blue. Didn't Nigeria have representation during the arbitration? So it didn't come out of the blue. These are things that they should have known all along. And in any case, if you hold a meeting and you say you can't tell the public because of, for understandable reasons, looking at the magnitude of what is involved, if you wanted to probe this kind of thing and go after those who we already know, should even come to the public to come and say it. Mm-hmm. So these are the issues. Like, I will say it again. I'm not in any mood for cherry picking at this time. What I am begging government to do this morning is to sit back and be honest. Do an honest self-assessment. And it's not, one headline even says that they've drawn the battle line with
Yeah,
in a case that the previous government had negotiated, in a case that they've also said that they are going to negotiate. So confusing.
But I think the battle line may have been a media
and that's why we said that, look, propaganda and perception engineering at this point won't do anybody any
and what's the, when information is scarce, when information is scarce,
yes.
Lies,
Let's start with blueprint now. That's where we start from, and talks about insecurity. He says Southwest, Southeast governors strategized against herders and others, and security situation stabilized nationwide. Inspector General of Police is the one credited with that statement. All right, moving now to the Daily Times. The $9.6 billion judgment debt is still on the burner here, and Presidency holds emergency meeting as CSO storm British, Irish embassies or High Commission and demand a reversal of judgment. The whereabouts of Grace Tega, central negotiator of PNID central contract rather, unknown. Okay, that is still ongoing. News Direct is where we go next now, and it's talking about presidential polls. Supreme Court strikes out suit challenging Buhari's qualification. So I guess this puts to rest this controversy about the qualification or not, and so on, of the president. Now, Daily Trust is where we go next. The Daily Trust says it's still focusing on $9.6 billion judgment. EFCC launches forensic probe as presidency denies meeting with PNID. Okay, this is still on, and Nigerians certainly wait to hear what the government is doing, really. The Nation newspaper is the next one. $9.6 billion judgment. Federal government draws battle line with PNID. Negotiation option shelved. And Oshibajo ministers, foreign lawyers meet. That's what you see on the front page of the Nation newspaper. From the Nation, let's go to Vanguard, which is the last paper for this morning. Federal government weighs options as another $2.3 billion fine looms. Okay, this certainly is raising eyebrows across the country. And there's some multiple riders here to give us a little more explanation to this. And he says a $2.3 billion fine over Mambila looms in France. CSOs protest in Abuja. Shibajo, Malami, and Mefiele, others meet in Asu Rock. Okay, and file corruption charges against PNID boss, says Michael Aundaka, the former Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. Abaku writes Buhari and seeks national arbitration policy. That's what you see on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. But gentlemen, let's talk about the state of roads. That's where I'd like to, if you see, it's on the lips of many Lagosians and people around the southwest, because you see, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is very central to economic activity, social and economic activities in this region and in Nigeria at large. Now, if you look at the construction work going on there from the past so many years, I must say, but there has been some level of commitment to changing things now. Cyril, let me start with you. I wonder how satisfied you are with all of this to say, okay, in as much as there's going to be some traffic inconveniences, but let us bear it, something.
Charles, sorry, again, Mike, you know, writing this story, one would imagine that this is a road we've spent close to 20, 30 years constructing. That is not funny at all. But we want to believe and hope that this new initiative or this new move will help to bring it to an end. What the government said, and this is like for a 2-year period, what government has said is that there were changes to the design, that they modified the design to include all sorts of features, and that this partial closure was necessary to make sure that, you know, the work is done as it should be done. But then there is also the issue of the diversion to other places. So again, not that those areas are even perfect, but the pressure has just been taken away. We want to sincerely hope and believe that this would be action, words met with concrete action, and that come the set time, indeed, we will have a road. Because road infrastructure, roads and transport are supposed to be the foundation on which you build any economy. Bad roads mean actually leakage on the economy. People can produce, but they don't have a means of moving things around. So and so bad roads mean that price of things will go high. The burden is going to be on the consumers again. Let's hope that this road is going to, because the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, for instance, you know, is like the hub. When things land in Lagos, you want to move them out of Lagos. That's the road everybody turns to. And so reasonably, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of pressure on the road. Not least for the fact that you have a number of churches on that expanse that attracts thousands of people almost every month to that place. So that is arguably the busiest road, maybe in West Africa. And so how do we want such a road to look?
Even besides the church, there's also the NAFSAT headquarters there as well.
Companies, you know, even companies. So that is arguably one of the busiest roads in Africa.
All right, Charles.
Let's hope that, you know, it's taken seriously. And
okay, besides Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, work is also ongoing on the Benin-Ore Road.
Yes. Benin-Shagamu Road.
Benin-Shagamu, or you know, and all of that. And the project there is a little different because it's fund from the Sukuk.
Yes.
You know, so do you, from the area of roads, because these are not the only roads that the government is doing, right, how satisfied are you that at least after so many years, with attention and commitment and disbursement of funds and allocation of funds to these roads, at least we're seeing them being done right now? You know,
earlier today we were joking about those pits that were dug on the roads. And that time that you will see the pits will be filled in the daytime. In night time they go there, they dig for them just to
My brothers in Benin.
Exactly. So, but thankfully, I think we have gone beyond that point. We have pushed that behind us, seemingly so. The work going on, the rate of work going on is actually, for me, I just traveled to Benin and come back. I've seen that there's a marked improvement on particularly after Jebode, or you can really drive, apart from the fact that I personally counted 33 checkpoints, both police, all of them, 33 between Jebode and Benin. I counted 33. So the road is getting more pleasurable to drive on, but the journey is being slowed down by activities of security agencies that mount checkpoints at every half a kilometer. So, but what I think, what I'm going to say now may not be popular, but I'm going to say that because of the recurrent paucity of funds, we don't really have funds to repair. It has to take us about 30 years, as I said. What I therefore suggest, we can go the way that is done in Egypt, in Morocco, is that we can decide to either two ways, either to concession. I know boycotting failed in that aspect. We can concession the road on that platform of build, operate, and transfer.
But
maybe 30 years.
But we've done.
No, hold on.
That's
I said we can revisit it and make it more effective, or we can bring back tolling. Now, tolling will bring back. I know that a lot of people will say, okay, people will steal money, but do you know we can even effectively channel the tolling? Okay, what we are going to do is that the template is that you can do a postpaid tolling. Once you are either registering your car every month, you postpaid for whatever, so that when you get there, you swipe your card, and then you are allowed to go instead of paying hard money to people. So we can do that.
Out of pocket.
Exactly. So that what that will help us to do is that the money that government is lacking, that the fund, we can now, government can reach out to that, and then meet up with the shortfall.
Yeah, but Cyril, the issue of tolling, we remember I think about a year or 2 years ago when the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, hinted on the issue of tolling. We saw the reaction from Nigerians as to taking us back again to those days. I wonder what you think about tolling now.
Mike, it's like when we said we wanted democracy. Some people took off their military uniforms and were Agbada and said, we are now also civilians. It's the same way the people who, this is Nigeria, the same persons, how many people have the wherewithal to build, operate, and transfer, for instance? So what happens is that the same people who were sabotaging the construction of those roads will become the same owners of companies that will help you to build and do the... So this is the problem. Nigerians know that somehow there is lack of genuineness on the part of the authorities. And so today, somebody could be in government. Tomorrow, he's the same person who is the hand officer and voice of Jacob. However, the job
so Nigerians don't trust it.
From the moment the job gets, people will applaud. But for as long as they have seen that we have gone left, it didn't work. When they said that it didn't work, we've gone right, it didn't work. There is always this feeling of cynicism. Until we have come to the point where, until government gets it done by any means possible, people wouldn't believe that that they have a stake in what is going on.
Okay.
And so when it's bring tolling, this tolling thing has been tried in other places in some states.
Very effective.
And the narrative has been very bad.
But it works in so many other countries.
It can work
in other countries, it works. But what is the thing that whenever it crosses our borders and comes to Nigeria, it becomes something
which
else.
is why I'm saying that
it
can be done by postpaid. So in that case, you don't dip your hand into your back pocket and give the money. The money doesn't go to the government. So if you postpaid, all you need to do, you are giving a card, you swipe, and then you go.
You won't be there when they are agreeing on the amount to do that. If they spend 10 million naira to do the road.
Unfortunately, we have to round it off here now.
Very soon the road will again.
So much to say, so much to talk about when it comes to tolling and the road constructions in Nigeria, but we have to leave it here now. Charles Ideho, thank you so much for coming on the program. Cyril Abaku, thank you.